Hi everyone, it's Dave with Return to the Vintage. Thank you so much for joining. For those that are new to the channel, I am an antique and vintage reseller on eBay and fairly new to YouTube, but hoping to provide some guidance to those that might be looking to start reselling in antiques and vintage in 2026. Vintage and antique reselling is a lot different than what you'll see in other parts of YouTube regarding reselling, but I'm hopeful to give you some guidance in regards to the basics and then a little bit more specific into maybe some strategies to consider if you get started. So basics, first of all, what you need. You don't need to go and buy a whole lot of equipment. Most of what you'll probably be looking to start with, as I did, are just things around the house. So you just need your phone, you need your laptop, and just a standard printer. Boxes for shipping, you can find those pretty much around the house or just ask friends for them along with tape. Maybe if you don't have a scale, I'd say maybe that's one of the things that you might need to get. But even when you're taking photos, you don't need any expensive photo booth, just kind of a nice place with good lighting. So just as getting started, I think those are some of the basics that you need. And as you maybe continue on that journey, you could advance and purchase more things along the way. But I'd say to get started, those are the basics. In terms of where you buy or what you buy, to start with, I would certainly recommend just maybe looking around the house, finding something that is antique or vintage, or maybe even not, but just something around the house that you know it has some value, just so you can understand the platform on eBay and how it works. The last thing you want to do is go and make a bulk buy of expensive or what you think are expensive antiques or vintage items and then either not do very well with it or even maybe not have interest in doing it any further. So to start with, I'd say find something around the house. And like I said, it doesn't have to be vintage or antique. It just has to be something to learn the platform, learn the process. And then once you get more advanced, then we can kind of talk about next steps from there. But as you go through the process with something around the house, if you like it and it goes well, the places that I would recommend going and buying are garage sales, depending on the season when you can get out. In antique and vintage, you could actually go to antique stores and find some good deals there as well. Facebook Marketplace is a great place to start to see. That's actually how I got my first item that I sold. And then estate sales. You'll find some good items in those as well. And for me, being in the Northeast, when it's not garage sale season, I do need to go to estate sales. But in what we do, you talk about Goodwill and Savers and going to bins. That's not something that I would recommend, or a place that I've only been once before, and it was definitely not my arena to find the items that would fit well in my store. But I'd say those are the main places to go to find the type of items that we typically sell. In terms of once you do find something that you like and you're starting to gain momentum, some of the basics in regards to when you do go to ship items. Like I said, you don't need too much equipment. I think the scale is maybe one of the only things that you may not have around the house that you need, but some of the basics regarding shipping, eBay takes a lot of it out of your hands and makes it much easier, but you do need to find a box, make sure you find some padding, especially in the world of vintage and antiques. You need to find some kind of padding to make sure a lot of these items that are sometimes fragile are well packed and delivered safely. But as you're getting started, you can even use newspaper, but I would say make sure that you do use secure boxes, not just something that like a shoe box or something, but something that's maybe an Amazon delivered box, or other friends have good cardboard boxes that you can use. But essentially the basics are, once you do sell something, what you want to do is try to make a box that's as small as possible, that has enough padding for your item. You go and you weigh it, and then you go right onto the eBay platform. You just put the details of the size and the weight, and it'll calculate everything for you. There are different options that you have between the post office, which is USPS, UPS, and FedEx. For me, a lot of what I send is through the post office, so USPS Ground Advantage. I usually only use UPS and FedEx if they're heavier items. So most of your work will probably be in the post office. But it's pretty basic. But again, I have other videos to help you specifically with the whole shipping process, but it's not hard. And then when you do go to print up a label, again, if you're getting started, you'll probably just have a basic printer. You can just print it up there and then go and tape it to the outside of the box and drop it off to the post office. But I would just say for me, I really take a lot of pride in my shipping. So I'd say just to make sure that you do have enough padding within the box for safe delivery. For me, it's also, taking pride in that a lot of the things I do sell are very rare or very fragile. And so taking that extra time will help on the end with the customer and their experience, and hopefully deliver positive feedback for you in terms of your performance. So some of the intricacies of antiques and vintage. So like I said, if you go and you look at a lot of YouTube videos on and kind of try to get a sense of what reselling means, majority of, at least when I was getting started, maybe 90% of them are focused on just general reselling. So reselling of new items, reselling of things that they get at the Goodwill bins, and things that just don't necessarily fit in our arena. So I'd say that the things that jump out to me, one of the nice things about vintage and antiques is that we're always going to have a market available. Usually a lot of our buyers are more tenured, so someone that's anywhere from their 40s on, because those are the ones that grew up in the 80s and earlier. And usually a lot of the people that buy antiques and vintage have kind of a connection when they were kids and growing up. So that it's a base of individuals that tend to have the money, expendable income, to be able to buy a lot of these items. And so the market, whether it be good, bad, wherever it might be, those that have the extra income will always be looking for items to purchase, which is good because the fluctuations aren't as you'll see in some of the other businesses specific to reselling. I think one of the other things is that you do, though, have to be patient because your items could be very rare, and that one or two people may not be looking exactly when you post it. So you do need to know that you certainly want to keep an eye on sell-through rate and see things that do sell, but also understand that it's going to come with time. You may post something and it may not be a month or 2 months or 3 months before it sells, but when it does, it's going to the right person and at a good amount of money. So that's one thing that you have to recognize. Also, the intricacies specific to antique and vintages, it's hard sometimes to really determine value. A lot of what we'll sometimes find are items that aren't just going to be on eBay that you've seen that were purchased within the last 3 months. I use a platform called WorthPoint, which is really helpful because it dates back in terms of how much something sold for within the last 10 years. Because again, it's good to have reference. I do a ton of research, but it's hard to find that research specific in eBay. And also, don't be afraid to use AI. If you use like a ChatGPT, if you're unsure of what something is, it can give you a lot of really good research in regards to what the item is. And I've done that a lot more recently. But again, not something that you need to worry about when you get started, but just something to think about. Also, antique and vintage. Another part that I would say that is difficult is that sometimes it's going to take you to find the good items. It's going to take a while. But when you do find those items, they usually come in collections. So you might go through dry spells where you're just going and you don't find anything in a garage sale. You don't find anything in an estate sale. You're just dried up and there's just nothing available. You just take your time, be patient. Don't just buy just to buy. The last thing you want to do is buy something that you need to get something posted. So I'm going to buy something and then post it. You really shouldn't do that. You should just be patient in that way as well, because sometimes what you'll do is you'll find a large collection of 1980s action figures or 1940s train set, whatever it might be. Usually these collectors have large groups, and that'll help you with your inventory over a longer time period. It just, they come in bulk. So just something else to think about. In terms of like my lessons learned, some of the things I would offer in terms of my past 3 years in doing this and what I've learned. Again, the first thing I had said was to be patient once you list something. Even when you buy something, be patient. When you list something, it's going to take time. You need to be patient. And you're also going to learn a lot, especially in your first year. I'm still learning every day in year 3. But you got to be patient, and you have to be able to learn, and you're going to make mistakes along the way, and just learn from those mistakes. Sometimes you're going to buy something that you think is going to go for a lot more, and it turns out it doesn't. But that's why you don't want to make a big expense at the beginning, because if you do make that error, at least you didn't spend a lot of money on it, and at least you get a chance to learn from it. So I'd say like patience and learning during your first year are things to consider and to make sure that you try to take advantage of. Don't buy anything large, especially when you're getting started. Don't go and buy art. Don't go and buy heavy items that are going to take a long time to ship. Like for me, art is tough because it's hard to judge when you first see it. It may be authentic, it may not be. It's hard to judge then. And then also it's really tough to ship. So especially if you're getting started, I'd say to stay away from those. I'd also say that larger items or heavier items, like I once sold and shipped a pedal car, and it was awful. I mean, I bought it for $100 and I sold it for $300, but it took me forever to box it up and to ship it, and the shipping costs were quite expensive. So over time, what I've learned is also to sell smaller items. So stay away from the art, stay away from the larger items, and stick with smalls, which are smaller items. They're also a lot easier to ship, a lot easier to store. Personally, I don't have like a shed. I don't have like a warehouse. I work out of my one-car garage. So, I'd say that the size of items also is important. And then I'd say also, as you consider content and as you consider trying to learn more about the items that you're selling, just be selective with what you watch on YouTube or, the other platforms. It's easy to get pulled into what others are doing and thinking that, oh, they're going to the bins and they're going and doing this and buying here and buying there, and then they're selling the next day. It's easy to get discouraged if you're watching them. Whereas, as you learn and you have your own journey, learn from your own mistakes, and learn from each of your sales as well. In terms of like my top tips that I would offer outside of lessons learned, like I said, start small. Start small. Don't go and buy a ton of inventory. Don't go buy a ton of items that you need for your selling and your shipping process. It's better to learn when you're selling smaller or less expensive items. Like I said, just to make sure that it's even something that you'd like to do. That would be a tip I would say that I'd offer. Secondly, I would say again, don't go with something that you like. Go with something that will sell. For me personally, I love vintage hats. I'm a sucker for vintage hats. And I went and I bought a whole lot of vintage hats thinking, okay, these are great. I love them. They're going to sell. Turns out they didn't all sell, and they're still sitting and waiting to be sold. I didn't spend a lot of money on it, but just because it was something I liked, I thought it would sell, but it hasn't. So just understand that even if you like it, it doesn't mean the person on the other side as a buyer is going to like it as well. Another tip I'd say is do your research as much as you can, even if it's before going and buying something or considering buying something. I do all kinds of research. Like I said, Worth Point's great. Checking on eBay with prices of items that have sold is great. Using AI to kind of get a sense of an item and its history is great. But I'd say research is another thing that does take time. But as you go and you learn, all of that research is going to benefit you along the line. So something else to consider. Also, another thing I would say as a tip is if you are considering buying something or someone is offering to sell you something, understand that as you look at eBay in terms of the price of something, you can't go off of what something is currently priced for. You need to go off of what something had sold for. Because something could be listed as $500, but it has never sold, or in the last time it sold for $200. So just something else to think about when you're looking at how much something is worth or how much something has actually sold for. I'd say that is another tip to think about. If this is something that you want to do, I'd say another tip is if you were going to upgrade any of your materials, I'd say thermal printer was my best buy. Wasn't a lot of money, but it was a big investment that improved my productivity more than anything else. So if you do get to a point where you feel like this is something you want to stick with, that would be the first purchase that I would offer as a suggestion, because a lot of what you're doing is trying to work through the process fast, and that was the number one part that I would say helped speed up the process for me. And then one more tip I'd say is value your time. I earlier on my time, I would say that I spent a lot of time parting out items, a lot of time spent on items that were priced really low, but I felt like the time commitment would be worth it when in fact it wasn't. So as you go along, if there are items that you find that don't need cleaning, or items that you find that don't need to be tested, those are the best that I would offer as suggestions, or even items that don't need difficult shipping or are fragile. Like, you'll see that the value of your time is extremely important. So just think, if I'm going to buy this, what's the time commitment versus how much I'm going to get out of it in the end? That's something else that I would offer as a tip. In terms of like your realistic goals for your first year, I was fortunate. I had a really good first year. I was 50,000 in gross, but my first quarter was not very good. I just happened to learn really quick. But again, realistic goal, don't think high profit, think learning, research, understanding everything in your sector of antique and vintage. And you don't need to come into this with prior experience in antiques. I didn't. But I think your first year is just so much learning and gathering and understanding the process as a whole. But like I said, I was fortunate as a part-time reseller to earn 50,000 in gross sales my first year. So it can be done, but I wouldn't think lofty goals. I would think more trying to understand the process and the industry and how things operate in your first year. So hopefully that was some good information to help. If there are other areas that would be beneficial, feel free to leave comments below. I do have some past videos on shipping and specific items that I found. I actually did write a short book as well. I'll leave the link below as well if it's something that's helpful for someone that's getting started. But hopefully 2026 brings some productive reselling for you. Hopefully you enjoy it. A part of why I do it is because I do enjoy it. It's not my full-time job, but hopefully you have a productive first year, and look forward to providing some more content to help some of my fellow vintage and antique resellers. Thank you. Bye.